As we reach the summit, we often focus on the amazing views, but the plants on the hilltops also are pretty unique, and this is one of the really many habitats within the Blue Hills, and in a really stressful environment as well. I'm Judy Laird-Jacobs, the Executive Director of the Friends of the Blue Hills, and I am with Rick Kesseli again. Do you want to introduce yourself?
You just did, but I'm Rick Kesseli. I'm in the chair of the biology department at UMass Boston, and I live in Milton, so I come to the Blue Hills all the time.
And we are on the top of Buck Hill, so if you've been here, let us know with yes or no in the comments. You are watching Blue Hills Alive, your weekly guide to the Blue Hills, sponsored by Tom O'Neill of Success Real Estate in Milton. And if you want suggestions for where to hike in the Blue Hills with the best views, I encourage you to download our free trail chart with 19 of the best trails in the Blue Hills at friendsofthebluehills.org/chart. And I think we can get going. So we're on the top of Buck Hill. What makes this particular habitat of the many habitats in the Blue Hills unique?
Well, Judy, I'll start by saying that we're on Buck Hill, correct? And Buck Hill is about almost 500 feet high. So it's one of the, you all know that New Hampshire has the 4,000 foot club. Well, here in Boston we have the 400 foot club. Buck Hill being one. That direction is Chickatawbit, which is a little higher. And then if we walk over the top of this, you'll see Great Blue, which is 625, 35 feet, something like that. And so these are, today Judy's dragged us up this mountain, and we can add it to our collection of the 400 Club. So it's Buck Hill, and why is it called Buck Hill? Judy, do you know?
No, I don't.
Well, okay, well, I'll come up with an answer. So the first person who ever came up here was a fellow named William Buck, and his nickname was Billy Buck, and since you know that a Bill and a Buck are the same, people call him Bucky Buck. I made that up. And I noticed right over there, I see his initials marked into the sand.
If you know the answer to why this is called Buck Hill, we would love to know in the comments, because obviously we don't know.
We don't know. But I think my answer's as good as any. Okay.
So let's go. We're going to plants now. So why are the plants up here different from some of the plants in the rest, like in the bottom of the base of the hill?
Well, at a serious note now, I said it's almost 500 feet high, and that doesn't seem like very much, but 500 feet in terms of microclimate makes a big difference. If you look here, it looks very, very dry, and the habitat is quite different. 500 feet or 400 feet in elevation is really pretty much equivalent to about 100 miles in latitude. So the temperature here, surprisingly, is cooler than it would be in Boston by maybe a couple degrees Fahrenheit. It's a little cooler, even though today we're pretty hot and it's dry. So it's about 100 miles difference. Just this 400 feet is sort of similar to going north about 100 miles. The other thing that's a little different here, I said it's dry. Why do you think it's dry? Less rain? What do you think, Judy?
It's not less rain.
Not less rain.
No.
In fact, that's correct. It's not less rain. Right here gets probably on average, well, I don't know, Great Blue, where they keep the weather station, on average about 7 inches more of rain a year than Boston. So there's actually more rain and cooler, yet it's dry and hot up here. So the habitat is very dry, and it's hot because it's exposed. It's dry because, well, you probably know, I could demonstrate it, but if I were to pour water here, you would see it run downhill. So it runs off the hill. So water does not stay here very long. And you can imagine, too, that the water table, you know, the underground water that trees and plants want, is way below the surface here, much lower than down below. So trees, you can't get to be a very big tree here because you'd have to run your roots way, way deep. So the plants here, so it is dry, even though there's a lot of water and it's cooler, but it's because the exposure, the wind, dries everything out very, very quickly. And so consequently, the plants up here are very special in that they're adapted to this dry habitat. And I mentioned earlier to Melissa, who's holding the camera. This is kind of, some of the plants here in the habitat feels a little like being on Cape Cod in terms of dryness, and some of the same species here. So looking at the things here, you can see the biggest thing in the area is this is pitch pine. And then over the top there's one white pine. It's a little different, and you can tell them apart pretty easily. Pitch pine have those cones, and I'll talk about that in a second, but it's adapted to fire and dry habitat. White pine has cones too, but they don't stay on the tree. And the easiest thing to tell, white pine, I'm showing here, this is the fascicle of leaves, and there are 5 right there per fascicle in white pine, and the pitch pine has 3. So they're really easy to tell apart. So those are the 2 biggest trees here. And in particular, pitch pine is very adapted to dry habitat and also fire habitat. So that's pretty much the biggest thing here.
Wait. Can you explain more? I think that fire habitat, so it can't reproduce unless there's fire, right?
Well, that's sort of true.
Okay.
The cones often stay closed for a long period of time. They will open immediately if there's a surface fire in the area, and then drop their seeds. The idea is that they're planting in fertile habitat where there's no other plants because they've all been burned up, and so the pitch pine can grow and germinate quickly. But they will drop their seeds over time if there hasn't been a fire. So you'll look at that tree and there are cones that are open, and I don't think there's been a fire up here for a while. So this habitat is kind of disturbed habitat. Down below, as you all know, probably Massachusetts was largely deforested for the purpose of farms. But the tops of hills, while they didn't farm here, they were often deforested for woodlots. So the Blue Hills were all cut down. So everything that's here is relatively new. There's very little old-growth forest in Massachusetts. The closest piece that's near here is there's a piece on Mount Wachusett. So this is all relatively new, but these are all very well adapted to this type of habitat. The plants in here, I was going to show you before we run off and look at plants. I have a little collection of leaves because it turns out there's a lot of different oaks up here, and so I'm going to place them down here, and you'll be able to see these different things. And then when I walk around, you'll be able to tell. That. So there's 5 different species of oaks. These 2 over here are in the white oak group, and they always have rounded edges. This is the black or the red oak group, and they always have very pointy edges. You can see right there at the end there's a little spine that sticks out. This is called chestnut oak. It's not chestnut. This is a white oak. And then this is probably scarlet, that's black, and this is bear oak, which is really common here. And it's never gets taller than 6 feet. I'll show some of them. And they have white on the back side, so they're pretty special and you can see them. They're very, very small. It's the scrub oak that's all the way through here. So these are all part of one group, this is the other. And then on the way up here, I thought it was nice, but this is actually chestnut. So we passed a couple of old chestnut trees. As you know, those used to be the most dominant trees in all of the Northeast, valued for their wood, their nuts, and then the chestnut blight basically wiped them out. And you can see stumps growing, and we did on the way up, saw 2 or 3 where the stumps are growing. You have small, brushy-looking trees that never get too tall, maybe 20 feet, 30 feet, and then they get hit by the blight. So that's actually chestnut, not oak. But you can see why this is called chestnut oak. So we're going to see all of those as we walk through here. And these are all of these, except the chestnut itself, all of these are pretty well adapted to dry habitats. So they're up here because they survive very nicely up here. Other things up here, this is pin cherry, and it has little fruits popping out there. The fruits come from the axillary leaves, so it's quite different. And over there, if we go to it, there's a black cherry. It has a very different kind of flower stalk. And pin cherry is also adapted to fire in that it produces seeds that can last in the soil for 50, 60 years, waiting for the next fire. So this probably will make some seeds. They'll sit here. They might not germinate for a while, and then if a fire comes through, boom, they're first things up. Pioneer species. Similar again to the pitch pines there. They will pop up, they drop their seeds in the fire or just after the fire, and then they can pop up and germinate quickly. And pitch pine is also adapted to fire. It's come through this area both naturally and not. Because if the fire's not too serious, it might burn all the leaves. It can actually resprout all the leaves. If it's a little more serious fire, it can burn the trunk, but it can resprout from the trunk. So it's a pretty amazing tree and nicely adapted and stuff. So they have different kinds of mechanisms for adapting to this sort of harsher environment. There's other plants up here that we can walk and see. You want me to keep going?
Sure, let's try.
Okay, come this way a little bit. And now we can see them in. So this is all the bare oak, and it never, right here, very scrubby looking. It never gets much bigger than this, and it's everywhere here. So if I'm looking that direction, the scrubbiest looking things that you're seeing everywhere is all that bare oak. There's a few taller trees over there, and those might be one of those other oaks I looked at, or one of these cherries that are up here. And coming this way a little more. There's a ton of blueberries up here. All of these are blueberries. And there are places where you can see the berries. They produce nice, the berries aren't ready yet.
When should we come back for the berries?
Sorry?
When should we come back for the berries?
In the later summer. It's just definitely too early. We might see, there were some fruits on some of them below, and we'll probably see some of those as well.
We'd love to know if you've had some of the blueberries in the Blue Hills.
Yeah, they're great, and they do get quite a few up here. There's another plant that's adapted to dry habitat. It's called sweet fern, and it's because it has a very aromatic smell. Can you smell that? There. It's not at all a fern, however. It's in the it's related to bayberries and things like that. So it's a flowering plant. It's not a fern, but it's called sweet fern. So the common names are wrong. Yeah, there's this little fruit there or something. Yeah, I don't know what that. No. So that's common up here. It's also adapted, always sandy, dry habitats, which is exactly what we're in. And come this way. Oh well, there's couple more things here. There's right here is this is an amelanchier, sometimes called shadbush or juneberry, and you can see the fruits are developing, so they should be probably perfectly good in June. I don't think people eat them, but anyways, that's up. I noticed that up here. And then way at the bottom, there's this plant, which is also related to blueberries. It's called bearberry. And again, a lot of these things you might see on Cape Cod, in the sandy, dry areas. You would see probably most of that stuff there. So quite a few different plants here. And then walking over here, since it's really, where was the best spot? Let's go that way. Follow me this way. Let's go back to the, since we were talking about the pitch pine, it's kind of nice. You can see there's like a developing female cone right there. So that's going to make the cone that you're used to. And then right here, there's the male cones. Melissa said that she didn't take her allergy medicine and she's sneezing, and it's often pines with huge amounts of pollen, oaks also, that produce so much pollen because they're wind pollinated that cause people to have allergies. So you see the male cones here and the female cones here. So this is all in pitch pine, and you can see all the cones staying on the trees.
The pollen from the male cone is blown onto the female? Is that
yes, it's just called the birds and the bees, but we don't have the birds or the bees in this case. But
it's
yes,
just pollen.
Yes.
Okay.
So the pollen gets blown onto the female. That's right. The female cones are often below the male cones on the plant, but not always. So this pines are often monoecious, separate male and female flower or sex organs, so not really flowers. Right over there's the white pine again, and you can see it has a very different look to it. It doesn't have all the cones, the gnarly look to it is missing. And then I noticed right here, there's another cherry. So we had the pin cherry a minute ago, which had just a few little fruits. And then you can see right here, there's these inflorescences, racemes of white flowers, and that's a black cherry. And that's also likes this kind of habitat, obviously. So related species, but different. So there's quite a few different things up here. Let's see, what else should I talk about?
You want to talk about what depends on this particular habitat?
That's a good question. I told Judy on my way down to meet her this morning, I almost stepped on a snake. So there are quite a few animals that live up here. The plants, as I mentioned, you won't probably find any of these other plants in the Blue Hills. Many of these things, the bearberry, some of these scrub oaks and stuff are only at the tops of these the hills in the Blue Hills, and you won't see them down below. So there are unique plants that tend to stay here. And then up here I've noticed a lot of dragonflies going by. Thank goodness they're eating all the bugs that might be coming at us, as well as there are snakes, and of course there are rattlesnakes supposedly right across the way. They could come over here, I don't know. But that one wasn't a rattlesnake that I almost stepped on this morning. I was sure of that. Anyways, the habitat is kind of special. And 2 weeks ago, I was sitting in a wet meadow with you guys, and now I'm at the top of this, the 400-plus footer, and a very different habitat, microhabitat in a very short distance. And the plants that we saw 2 weeks ago in the meadow, you don't find any of them up here. So it's a very different set of things in the area. I think I've covered pretty much. There's other grasses in here, number of different grasses and a few sedges. But I think, the blueberries, the bearberries at the bottom, the scrub oak, the bare oaks here, and the slightly other taller oaks that we just covered a minute ago are all in this area. And then, of course, as you get higher, there's a few, or a little taller, there's a few of the other types of oaks, plus the pines that we see here. And makes it a very unique habitat. You get to see Chickatobit that way. You get to see that's Great Blue Hill over there. So they're the other two 400-plus footers, 500 almost. You made it to the top of, you're part of the club now, I guess.
Great. Thank you, Rick. And thanks so much for watching. Please let us know your questions about what you see on the tops of the hills. All sorts of plants up here. And you are watching Blue Hills Alive, sponsored by Tom O'Neill of Success Real Estate in Milton. And if you would like to further explore the Blue Hills, you'll want to download our free chart of 19 of the best trails in the Blue Hills at friendsofthebluehills.org/chart. And we will see you next Thursday at noon. Thanks.
Amy has a question about where exactly we are, because she joined late. So do you want to just quickly say where we are?
Oh, we're not ending. Amy wants to know where we are. We're on top of Buck Hill.
Yep.
So Buck Hill is just west of Route 28. It's right between, the other side is Chickatobit, so it's just south on Route 28 of the Chickatobit Route 28 intersection. And it's where we're on the Skyline Trail. So the Skyline Trail does peak the Chickatobit that side, goes over Buck Hill here, and then keeps going to Great Blue. So it's how long? 10 minutes, 15 minutes to get from the road to here?
It's a really great hike if you want like a really quick view, because it's like a 10-minute walk up from the road, from the highway, and then you have this amazing...
It is all up though. Of course you get to go down.
Yeah. Thanks for asking.
Amy says thank you. You're welcome, Amy.
You're welcome, Amy. Great. Okay. We good? Good. Thanks, Amy. And we'll see you next Thursday at noon.